This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Hi, my name is Pamela Fuselli, and I'm the host of Popping the Bubble Wrap. Are you the person in your family who worries about the safety of others, about buying safety products and using them? Are you yelling, "Yes, that's me"? This is the podcast for you. Raising a child or children can be a hair-raising undertaking, and keeping them safe is a priority. Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast explores what you really need to think about as a parent or caregiver, and provides easy tips on prevention strategies. No bubble wrap here, though. When we think about preventing injuries, our gut reaction might be to ban kids from engaging in risky activities so we can keep them safe. But that kind of bubble wrap can actually harm your child even more. There is a difference between a hazard, something bad that we need to deal with, and a risk, something your child can benefit from. What's a risk and what's a hazard? Changes as the child grows and develops skills. Sounds complicated, doesn't it? But it might be easier than you think. Joining me today are Jenna, Mandy, and Stephanie. Thanks for being part of Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast.
Thrilled to be here.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
There's a lot on parents' plates. Weighing the risks of your child or children is just one of them. So tell me a bit about how you balance letting your kids grow and develop while keeping safety in mind. What are some examples maybe that you've had recently that you're having to weigh those two decisions of letting them go and do what they want to do, but ensuring that they are safe?
Absolutely. I can start off if you want. So my daughter is 5 and my son is 3. I've got a fenced-in backyard, and I know I feel like the instinct is always to want to be watching them constantly and, be a foot behind them and make sure that they're safe in that way. But as they're getting older and more confident in what their bodies are able to do, what they're able to do and accomplish, and that physical strength as well too, which is part of it, letting them go outside and be able to explore in a safe environment. So we live on a quiet street, but there are still risks of cars and whatnot as well too. So having the fenced in backyard where I know both fences are locked, they're able to play back there. I can see them, not watching over them every step of the way, but being able to see them while they're doing things. I can hear them as well too. All of those pieces where I think it's important to let them have that exploration time and get hurt a little bit sometimes as well too, fall down, scrape knees, jump off of things where they can, but doing it in a safe environment, a calculated environment, I suppose, as well too, and making sure that real risks like cars or them leaving the backyards are, taken care of.
Jenna, you have a daughter who's 11 and twins who are 9. So you've had some years to experience weighing those risks and balancing, what your kids want to do, and as well have, both daughter and son. So what have, tell me about how you've approached this.
I think kind of like Mandy was describing, it's been fun to be able to kind of have those little milestones of moving along in, okay, I don't have to come outside to play with you. I can let you go outside. And the window trick, I use that all the time. Like, yeah, I'm just going to open the window so I can hear you. With me, it's not so much that I'm worried about the surroundings. I'm worried about the fact there's 3 of them, and there's usually 2 of them that will end up getting into it with each other a little bit. And as a mom, that one took me the most time to figure out, like, no, I need to let my kids figure out how to deal with each other. I can't always step in. I can't, and especially with the shift from going from having our daughter and then having twin boys as they got a bit older, realizing that sometimes when they were rough and tumble playing, they were still playing. And I didn't need to stop in. I didn't need to insert that fear and that, sense of bubble wrap. It was, no, this is okay for them. This is within, the risk here is acceptable. They should be able to figure out how to be physical with each other. And so I think fairly quickly I figured out those moments of like, oh, no, okay, if you're about to like push someone off the edge of the deck, I'm going to intervene. If you're just going to kind of shove at each other and you're already on the ground, well, okay, you're going to figure out what you can take and when you need to retaliate and sort it out that way. And as they've started to get a bit older, it's kind of funny when you finally have that shift of, they'll get into a scrape scrape a knee or, get some kind of little cut, and they go and get a Band-Aid by themselves. They don't come ask you for it anymore. They've learned how to take care of it. And that to me was kind of this, kind of a nice moment as a mom. I know some people get that very like, oh my goodness, my babies are growing up. This is so terrible. Like, oh, this is fantastic. They actually understand that, they have the power to deal with these things. These are small moments that, a little cut is not something that we need to overreact to. We can just go get a Band-Aid. And yeah, I'd appreciate if you tell me you cut yourself. But if you're not, bleeding profusely, sure, just go get the Band-Aid. That's good.
That's excellent. Well, I mean, it's a life skill that they need. They will need for sure. Stephanie, your children are, between 6 years and 3 months. So that's a widespread, and obviously you've probably had to deal with them in different ways. The 3-month-old probably hasn't gotten into too much yet.
Not yet.
So not yet. But what's your approach to balancing, encouraging your kids to be active and to be engaging in the things that they love to do?
Well, something we like to do as a family is we have a huge trail system here, living in Prince Edward Island. So it goes from one end of the island to the other. There's not a whole lot of breaks where the roads are. So we know how far we can bike together or walk together as a family. Usually it's me pushing the stroller and the little ones on their bikes, and dad's helping push the 3-year-old along on his bike. But one of the risks that we let them take, the 6-year-olds anyway, I mean, they're got their helmet on. She's still on training wheels so far. She doesn't want to take them off yet. But that builds her confidence, right? So we let her do that. But she likes to ride super far ahead and then come back and tell us what's ahead a little ways. So at first it was like she's out of sight, what's happening. But she's really confident on those 4 wheels, and we let her take that risk. She comes back beaming, and the smile is just worth the risk for me to let her go a little ways ahead. And like I said, they're kilometers and kilometers long. So I know she's not getting anywhere near a road or anything like that, any vehicles. So I just let her build her confidence that way. We talked last time we were chatting, we talked about climbing trees and letting her climb those trees and go up higher and higher. But if the little 3-year-old's there, then I am close to him, because he also he's a little bit clumsy. He's just like me. I was the kid who would fall out of the tree. My brother would be like 20 feet above me, and I was the one with the, bruised knees and scrapes. And my mom would always yell out the door, "Is anyone bleeding?" No? Okay, well then keep going. So I've kind of adapted that in my home, which some might judge me for, but as long as there's laughter and there's not a whole lot of tears going on, I'm not going to step outside when they're outside doing their own thing. I'm just going to let them kind of figure it out for themselves. And that's a reward in itself for them, because they get to build that confidence and become their own individual.
Yeah, I think the word too, risk. I mean, we've kind of gone back and forth in the injury field about, risk. What does that mean? And you talked about, being out of sight, and it changes as they grow. For the 2 or 3-year-old, that may be the risk. Whereas, a 9-year-old, Jenna, your 9-year-old, being out of sight is not a risk at all. It's become just, what's normal for their age. So it really does change as they grow. A risk in one age group is not a risk in another, or a hazard in one age group is not in another. It becomes a risk, and that there's this negative connotation to risk, but we're trying to put some some definition around it to give parents, that allow them to encourage their child and their children as you do to be able to be independent and to learn how to play together, how to negotiate those relationships with others, and it is such a reward. That smile on their face when they have achieved something is just, as you say, it's worth everything. You mentioned just now, Stephanie, about the next sort of area that I wanted to explore with you is around that perception of risk and your parenting skills, and being judged by other parents or your friends or family in terms of how you've chosen to raise your kids, either positively or negatively. Maybe Mandy, you could start us off. Have you experienced judgment from other parents about how you're about
Absolutely.
what you allow your kids to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Amelia, who's 5, she's an interesting little girl, and I love it. She's so confident about some things and also very, very nervous about other things. So it almost allows me to be able to be confident that she knows what she's doing when she feels comfortable doing it. The tree is a perfect example, Stephanie. I've gotten, a little bit of backlash on the idea of letting her climb the tree. Particularly, I said, I mentioned to you as well too that, she did fall. She fell, but because she's a child who also becomes very nervous about things, I walk this fine line between, wanting to keep her safe, but then also wanting her not to develop fears around things as well too. So, I'm okay with her climbing the tree. I'm even okay with her falling. I mean, of course, in the sense that, of course, I don't want her to fall and hurt herself as well too, but assessing what is the situation. So, did she hit her head when she fell? How far did she fall? All of these things. So when she did fall, thankfully only once, she did not hit her head. She fell right onto her, her side. She was okay. She was totally okay. So it gave us the opportunity to then not let her feel as though she had to be afraid afterwards. So, get back up. You feel good. We're good to go. But definitely. And I think, there are different generations and there are different parenting styles. I have very much tried to, I want to foster that confidence in her. I want her to feel comfortable. And I talk a lot about her, and I probably should talk about my son as well too, but he's a bit of a different character as well too, because he doesn't quite have the understanding yet if he does something, what might happen as well. But for her, I really want her to be confident in what her abilities are, to let her do that. And so when, even like I said about being outside as well too, letting them be in the backyard, I feel okay not being out there with them. And other parents might not agree with that. But I think about the surroundings we have. So for example, we don't have a pool in the backyard. So I feel okay with them being out there. Yes, we have a playground and Amelia will jump from the playground. But how far is it? How high is she going to fall from there? And again, trusting in her ability to understand it. I'm kind of lucky in the sense that Theodore doesn't necessarily try as much as she does. So he almost seems to have an understanding of his own body and his own ability that he's like, I don't like this. I'm not a jumper, which I'm grateful for. But I certainly I've experienced backlash from it, and even amongst friends, close friends as well too. And I'm a big believer in parenting the way that works for me, and not giving my opinion where it's not been asked about how other people parent. So if someone else feels more comfortable not allowing their child to climb the tree, actually I've got quite a large banister in my front entranceway here, and I let Amelia slide down the banister. My mother-in-law, whose house this was prior to, did not allow them to slide down the banister. So when they were here, that was her rule. Nope, we don't slide down the banister. When we purchased the house and we moved in, we slide down the banister. But I'm also never going to give an opinion to someone else when their kids are not allowed to slide down the banister. And I'll tell Amelia too, so-and-so's mom doesn't feel okay with that. We're not going to slide down the banister today as well too. And that's just kind of an example of where, like, in our house, when we're here, we're good with that and we're okay. And I know I feel comfortable and confident in her ability, but if someone else doesn't feel okay with it, then that's okay as well too. And no judgment.
Jenna, have you had that experience with friends or family, or just people in the park that you don't know, feeling like they need to tell you what they think?
There's definitely, Thankfully, I haven't run into too many people who felt the need to actually say what they were thinking. But there are times when you can tell in a person's face.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been a few of those. Like, oh, you're letting your premature child roll around in the cold mud puddle. Okay. And you can see that parent just holding theirs tighter while yours is rolling around. And I'm like, it's mud. It's all good. Eat the dirt. I'm fine with it. It's, it's
I
not
encourage
contaminated.
the dirty.
And yeah, very early on, I think I came to those moments with myself of going, okay, what do I want for my kids? What am I comfortable with? Do I care what other people think?
Mm-hmm.
And really, I don't. It's, we have to do what's right for us, what works for us. And I think it's very important for more and more people to take on that expectation that they shouldn't necessarily share their fears and their opinions, unless, of course, if you see something that is very unsafe, I think it's important that we find ways to say that in a way that's not coming off as judgmental and not coming off as, trying to insert your opinion. Mm-hmm. And, if someone were to see, something unsafe with my children, I would hope that they would share that information, but in a way that was constructive, in a way that was meant to, look at that risk and that hazard rather than just someone's opinion of, oh, well, we don't slide down the banister. That's not proper. That's not
right.
safe. That kind of thing. It's nice to be able to, have fun in your house. But sure. If someone's coming over that's not comfortable with that, it's important to teach our children, we don't have to do that in front of someone that we know is not comfortable with it. We can do that once they're gone. And I think, building that sense of respect at that young age with our kids is so important and part of that conversation.
Yeah, some of the, like you were talking about the risks and the hazard. I mean, some are very clear, like in the playground, if there's broken glass or, needles or broken equipment, that's really easy to see. The risky part is a little bit more subjective to identify. Stephanie, have you had that, and have you had feedback from family or friends or people you just meet in the street, and if you did, has it changed over the time that you had your first child to the one that you have now that's youngest at 3 months?
Oh, I let everyone give me their advice with my first, because that's what they do, right? Everybody wants to give you the advice on everything, and I felt judged by every decision that I made. I was even judged at the fact that my 5-year-old was still rear facing in her car seat until she was 5, which blew my mind because I've read everything and it's the safest thing to do, right? If you turn your child earlier, that's your decision, but don't judge me on keeping my child safe. But then I've also, on the flip side of things, been the parent who judges when someone is keeping their kid too safe at the playground. Right? Like my kids have friends who are the same age and my kids are running around and I'm watching them, but I'm not right next to them. And, I've had friends who have been right next to them and I'm just like, just get your hands off them and let them play. So I do find myself being the judgy person there, but I also do have to, respect them in that maybe they know that their child doesn't have the right footing or has fallen and that makes them nervous. So, you got to step back there. But I've also been very supported by other people and supported by my mom, because my mom was the type of person she had 7 brothers and she lived in a suburb area and there was always kids watching each other. And I wish I did have that for my kids where they could go out and play and the older kids would be watching the younger kids and stuff like that. But then I also wonder what the risk would be there. Like, does my 6-year-old want to do what the 10-year-old's doing? And is there a hazard in that? So, I find the whole judgment thing swirling. I'm either being judged or I'm judging. So maybe that's something I have to work on personally. I don't know.
Stephanie,
Yes.
you touched on something too. I think is important to mention. You're almost damned if you do and damned if you don't. You're being judged for keeping your child too safe by keeping them rear faced,
Right.
or you're being judged because you aren't keeping them safe enough in an opinion by letting them climb a tree or turning them the other way as well too, right? And
Yeah.
so it can be challenging for sure to, if everybody is giving their opinions and you let that go to your heart and you're concerned, or you change your parenting style based on everyone's opinion on it, right? You a little bit, you are kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, because you're perceived either way, right? Too fast and loose, and too strict about things as well, right?
Right. And those are the in-person interactions. We
Yeah.
don't have time today to get into the whole internet,
No.
social media kind of judgment, but I can't imagine. So, thank you so much for being so open and sharing your experiences and your approaches. I think that it is complicated, but in some ways by listening to you, I think the message is this can be done. And it can be a simple approach, and really to follow your own heart and your own experiences, and knowing your children is so essential to that. So thanks so much for joining us for this episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Do you have older children? National Teen Driver Safety Week launches on Sunday, October 15th. Check out parachute.ca/NTDSW for great tips. That's parachute.ca/NTDSW.
It's time to open your parachute.
Dr. Mariana Brussoni is the Director, Human Early Learning Partnership at UBC, an investigator at BC Children's Hospital Research Institute. She studies child injury prevention and children's outdoor play. Her research looks at the influence of parents, outdoor environments, as well as policies to promote children's outdoor play. Mariana, risk and hazards. This topic is one that's near and dear to your heart, balancing positive child development with injury prevention. When we think about dangers or injuries, there's often things like broken bones, but less often there are dangers associated when kids don't have an opportunity to play. So I want to get into some of those issues and your experience and what you've found in your research about that. But talk to me a little bit about that risk versus hazard. I think people may not understand, and I know we've had some challenges with the terminology, especially because sometimes a risk at one age or a hazard at one age becomes a risk at another age.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I started in injury prevention, we used risk, hazard, danger kind of interchangeably, and we didn't really differentiate between them. And so in my work, I've really wanted to pull those apart and make clear that risk is a neutral term. It can have positive or negative outcomes. And with a hazard, what that allows us to do is focus more on, okay, what are the dangers in the environment that could cause harm. And so, these are very subjective terms, but in general, the way that we describe it is a risk would be a situation where you want to keep intact the children's ability to make a decision around how they engage with that, whether it be, say, climbing a tall tree or some other activity, that the children are able to make the decisions around that. Whereas a hazard is recognizing that in some cases, children might not be able to recognize the dangers or manage the dangers even if they recognize them. So for example, broken equipment or broken glass or needles, on a playground or things like that. And even as you point out, in those cases, what's a hazard, say for a younger child or a child with less capability, is a risk for an older child that the child should be able to kind of have agency around managing it for themselves.
Yeah, so allowing kids to kind of assess the danger or the risk and knowing themselves well enough to be able to make some of those choices. It was interesting with our parent group. They talked about how do they assess what is a real risk, and I think they're talking maybe about a hazard there. But their approach to assessing their own children's capabilities. I mean, what are some of the things that parents should be looking for? I mean, obviously, physical dexterity and things like that. What are some of the other things that parents should be looking for when they're assessing how their kids are choosing their own adventure, if you will?
Well, parents will have a lot of experience with their kids, right? They know their kids best, so they'll have a sense of what their kids are capable of. What we find is that in some cases we have to encourage parents to just kind of step back a bit, and even when they might want to step in, say count to 17 and let the situation play itself out, in order to give themselves time with that original kind of gasp that gets caught in their throat, to actually suss out, give their brain some time to catch up to the situation, and like, how dangerous is this? How likely is it that something's going to go wrong? Do I actually need to step in? And if something goes wrong, how bad will it be? A scrape or bruise or something like that also has the opportunity to learn? Or are we talking about like a serious or life-threatening injury? And those cases are so rare. And so there is a lot of opportunity for parents to really put a pause and give themselves more chance to watch their kids in action so that they can learn more about what their child is capable of and how they can best support that, right? Because the other thing to think about is we can also kind of scaffold our children's risk assessment skills, right? So even if we think, they might not be able to deal with this particular hazard, but maybe with my help, like if they're climbing a tree and, maybe there's a branch that's not looking as secure, you can actually work with them to identify things like that and figure out together what the next step should be for them in kind of keeping themselves safe while they engage.
We often hear people talk about, my child is a risk taker. They have less fear or fear less. Is that a real concept, or is it on a sort of continuum of kids that are willing to be more risky in their activities?
Well, there's a concept of sensation seeking, like a personality trait of sensation seeking, and it's definitely a continuum, right? So you have people who are in kind of more or less extremes of that. So you will have some kids who feel or have the need for more kind of engagement with risk than others. But what we like to point out is that every kid needs opportunities to take risks. But what is a risk is in the mind of the child, right? So it's not for us to decide, that that's risky or risky play for you and not for you. It's for us to provide the environments for them to figure it out for themselves. Because in doing so, they learn so much about themselves. They're able to kind of calibrate, their comfort level and how far they want to go. And they're able to develop their own risk management skills. They're able to also think about in terms of, like when you're taking risks, you think about the feelings that you get. It's like, it's a very strong emotion. It's like scared, excited, fun. Those are really strong emotions. And in different situations, that those can be overwhelming. And so it's also important for kids to learn how to manage those really strong emotions for themselves and realize that they are capable, they're competent, they can manage these situations and they can manage those strong emotions. And those are learnings that they can take into all sorts of situations.
One of the areas that we hear about are, letting your kids go out on their own and what age is a good age to be able to let them go out on their own. And when in years past, all of the things that you were just talking about, those skills, those relationship skills, playing with friends, planning out your play, being in charge of your play, and places that you would go, that like our kids' scope of where they can play and how big that area is has shrunk incredibly over a couple of generations. What kind of impact do you think that has on children's development, and how important that kind of activity is for them?
Yeah, it's been quite striking. So, for example, even with data around children walking to school, and we saw a huge drop in that kind of in the 90s, right? And so there's lots of implications for that, and that's part of what we're trying to learn. Because also those kids kind of that had that shrunken kind of range are now parents, and the ranges keep shrinking too. And so what are also their expectations for what their kids are capable of based on their own kind of childhood experiences? And so some of the things that we're keeping an eye on and noticing in terms of trends are, for example, we see an increase in obesity rates, a decrease in physical activity, an increase in screen time and sedentary behavior. We also see an increase in anxiety and depression, mental health kind of issues. And so we're really concerned around, because as you point out, these experiences are so critical and important for so many aspects of children's development. We know that kids are more physically active outdoors and in play and when they can take risks than when they're indoors, that they're less sedentary. We know that they have more opportunities to engage with friends and develop their socio-emotional learning. We know that it's an opportunity to increase their self-confidence and their sense of resilience. So if you think about kind of your own play experiences, you have times when things go right and you're like, I did it. And then times when it all goes really wrong. But that's important too, because then you learn, oh, actually, I was able to manage that. It wasn't the end of the world, right? And that's really important for self-confidence and resilience. And then in terms of kind of mental health, as I mentioned, the sense of not only the self-confidence, but also the being able to manage these strong emotions that come with play and appropriately identify those as not threats. That they can be managed. And that's really critical for managing anxiety. So these are just kind of a small sampling of some of what we're finding in terms of the importance of these kinds of activities.
So there really are, when we think about talking about injury prevention, from Parachute's perspective, it's those physical injuries from play, from motor vehicle crashes, etc. But I think what you've done here is really expanded that definition of hazard by overprotecting kids from experiences. And the hazards don't just, if you're trying to keep your kids safe from an injury, from a broken bone, from falling from a tree, what you're doing in place of that is actually a hazard that probably isn't forefront in parents' minds when they're thinking about their kids' physical safety.
Absolutely. And certainly what we used to do in injury prevention is our sole focus was getting those injury numbers down kind of at any costs. And how our approach has expanded is, rather than trying to keep kids as safe as possible, moving towards keeping kids as safe as necessary, recognizing that we need to think much more holistically around children's health and well-being and development, and not cause a kind of unintended harm when we're trying to keep kids safe and reduce those injuries, and recognize that, in fact, risk and risk-taking is a completely natural part of children's development and health, and absolutely critically necessary for some important developmental milestones.
I could not have summed it up better myself. Thank you so much for joining our podcast this episode. Really appreciate it. And the information is so valuable for parents to give themselves permission, to allow their kids to have a little more freedom and to, as you said, more holistically think about them and the benefits of the play that is so important to their development. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Popping the Bubble Wrap is a podcast of Parachute, Canada's national injury prevention charity, whose mission is for Canadians to live long lives to the fullest by preventing serious and fatal injuries. We release episodes every 2 weeks. Next episode, I'll be talking to parents about if they feel their child is safer now than when they were a child. Help us reach parents and caregivers by sharing this link with your friends and family and giving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information, visit us at parachute.ca. Have a question? Write to us at poppingthebubblewrap@parachute.ca. You can also leave a message at 647-776-5123. That's 647-776-5123.
Popping the Bubble Wrap is produced for Parachute by Story Studio Network and Eye Contact Productions.
This is Story Studio Network.